Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining tonight's webinar, The Must Avoid Mistakes in Financial Services Resumes. We have a really great webinar for you all today. And we have our experienced senior resume writer, Laura Hill, presenting it tonight as well. She helps clients optimize their careers through personal assessment, strategic planning, and effective job search, including assistance with resumes and cover letters. Her clients include C-suite executives, MBAs from top business schools, Wall Street professionals, career changers, and young people starting their careers. Her broad industry experience includes financial services, especially capital markets and investment management, media, internet, consumer products, and professional services. Laura's career experience includes an 8-year banking career with JP Morgan Chase, executive search with Korn Ferry International, and Redwood Partners. She also has 10 years as a career outplacement coach and also heading client services for boutique outplacement firm Crenshaw Associates. Laura received an MBA in finance from NYU Stern and a bachelor's in marketing from University of Texas McCombs. And with that, I would just like to hand it off to Laura and have a great webinar, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Mache. I'm really glad to be here tonight. I'm speaking from New York City, where I can look out and see the Empire State Building. It's a lovely day here. So we have a lot to cover. I'm going to jump right in. First, here's our outline of we're going to talk about what's different now as compared to perhaps a few years ago, and when you did your resume, either coming out of a business school program or earlier in your career. Very briefly, we'll cover the purpose of the resume, some common, the most common mistakes that people make in financial services resumes, and some of the challenges and things you can do about it for people in financial services. We'll talk about resume trends. Just like fashion, there are trends in resumes. The content of your resume, and we're going to be really talking about accomplishments quite a bit. You'll hear me really hound in that point. The importance of accomplishments, a few don'ts, a few terminology questions, and some Q&A. So what's different now, perhaps, than a few years ago? One of the things is you're probably much more senior. The typical Ivy exec client is an upwardly mobile individual, and every few years you're rising to higher levels of responsibility, larger deals, whatever it is that you're doing, and the bar is really higher. Other executives that you're now competing against who are more senior very often have gotten help with their resumes. They tend to think in accomplishment terms, and you need to keep up in terms of the quality of your resume and the ability to represent the level to which you have risen. And of course, if the last resume you did was coming out of business school, those resumes were formatted completely differently than the way we format industry resumes. Another new thing that we're doing is to put your LinkedIn URL along with your phone and your email address right there in your resume, because in essence LinkedIn is now your electronic resume, and it should synchronize with your regular resume. Okay, quick little background. Purpose of a resume. These days a resume is really a brochure. It's a marketing document. It is not intended to talk about everything you've ever done in your career. It should be somewhat selected information that relates to the career path you're on and the type of job you're going for. Second thing that its purpose is really to match you to a job or a career path. The reader has to understand and see the right words that match you to a job description that they might be looking to fill. It's something that gets you in the door. It hopefully will help you get an interview. A lot of people really think that a resume can get them the job. Obviously that doesn't happen. So it's an entry point. One thing resumes do not do well is convey qualitative capabilities. You can say you have great leadership skills. It doesn't necessarily convey it very well in a resume. So what we do instead is to show examples, give examples, live examples and accomplishments of when you demonstrated leadership skills and the kinds of accomplishments and things that you led. A lot of people give too much detail, whoops, and about how you did things. What we're really going for is tell us very briefly what you did and the results. And that's where your accomplishments come in. And then in the interview is when you'll tell them about some of the details and more about how you accomplished those things. One note here, occasionally someone might be preparing a resume for use inside their company, or perhaps a resume that's used in conjunction with a professional license of some sort. In those cases, you probably don't want to brag as much as I'm going to tell you to brag. So when I tell you to brag, and it's all about accomplishments and impactful words, this is the selling aspect of when you're using your resume externally. Okay, this is also very helpful to know, and a lot of research has been done on how people read resumes, how much time they devote to them, and the answer is 4 seconds. In 4 seconds is few, and maybe 10 to give it a bigger number here, but in literally just a few seconds, the reader is deciding, do I know what this person does? Am I interested in what this person does? And do I want to look further, or do I want to hit the delete button? So that's why you have to capture people's attention very, very quickly. The person that's looking at your resume has probably either looked at dozens of resumes just before yours came up on the screen, so they may have eye strain, they've looked, they may be fatigued out from looking at dozens or hundreds of resumes. Or if they're a hiring manager, as we all know, we do a lot of reading in our jobs, we read on the computer, we do emails all day long. So again, we want to be considerate of eye fatigue in terms of what we present in our resume to the reader. The reader needs to see information in expected places. They want to see where you work, what your job title is, and over on the right margin they want to see your dates of employment at your different employers. And they need to be able to find these in expected places. If they have to look around and can't find this important data that they're looking to zero in on, it annoys them and may potentially just hit the delete button. They don't want to be bothered. And the first screen, the people who are screening your resume for the first time, is very likely to be a junior person. A junior person in the HR department or the recruiting department, or if it's a line executive that's hiring directly, more than likely it's their administrative assistant or someone junior on their staff. If they've handed over the job description, they've shown them the queue of 200 resumes and said, I'm going out of town by Friday, will you please show me 20 resumes that you think are a good fit. So that's the importance of the word matching. So what are the most common mistakes that people who work in finance or financial services might make? This first one about unclear positioning, this is really people in financial services. Finance people usually do a pretty good job. Controller, chief financial officer, financial analyst, etc. But in financial services it can be sort of vague because you've got great big organizations, and sometimes because these organizations are so big, an individual works within a sub-function, within a subgroup, within a more specific product area, and sometimes it does take a little more effort to explain the context of your department, of what your department does and what you actually do. Distracting design, I'm going to show you in a second what I regard as distracting and counterproductive design features that can turn the reader off and literally make it hurtful to their eyes. Too much stuff at the top before the reader gets to the company. I love the, I think it's a Wendy's tagline, where's the beef? Again, the reader wants immediately to find your company name, your job title, and your prior company. They want to see your career path. They don't want to read paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff before they get to the main action. Another big mistake is just putting a great big job description. Responsible for closing the books, responsible for financial planning, oversee capital projects, treasury tax. You can go on and on with your responsibilities. It's good to list them very briefly, but just telling me what you're supposed to do in your job and what your job description says you do doesn't tell me that you actually do those things, or that you've done them well, or that you've made any improvements, or that you've saved the company money or helped make the company money. Those are the kinds of things that you should be telling people, not just your job description. And of course, a lot of people have a lot of text, big blocks of text, and they bury an accomplishment right in the middle of a bunch of text, and so it really gets lost. So Maciej, very quickly before we do this poll question here, I'm going to show an example which I promised a minute ago, and this is what I call guilty of a lot of things here. But can everybody see? I assume so. This is a resume that has a lot of bolding, and it's got a great big paragraph, a whole great big section. We have a lot of text here, big blocks of text. Then we have a million keywords here, which tells me the person's sort of all over their place. Now we have a great big section here called Career Highlights. It's all bolded, and I tell you what, my eyes are just offended. Not to mention, I have to scroll all the way down the page before I ever get to the company name and the person's job title. So this is guilty of too much information at the top. The positioning seems to be all over the place because there's just too much for my brain to absorb. Okay, these days we almost never see a resume more than 2 pages. And in the world of business, if there is a third page, hopefully that's an addendum. Such like a deal sheet, for people who do deals or something. But these days, 2 pages max. And as I say here on this page, generally, this is very generally speaking, but around 10 to 15 years of experience is when most people will need a second page. There's just too much important and relevant stuff to get it and squeeze it onto 1 page. That said, it's specific to the individual and how much you've moved around and a lot of other things as to how much space that you need. But if you have less than 10 years of experience, I strongly recommend that you keep the resume onto 1 page. And the reason for that is up to 10 years of experience, you're vying for positions that call for 4 to 6, 6 to 8, 8 to 10, whatever years of experience. And the other candidates who will be competing for those jobs will generally have 1-page resumes because they're looking for someone, who's probably only, 10 years or so out of college. Okay, so I told you we were going to talk about fashions. What's in fashion, what's out of fashion. What's in fashion now, and we'll look at a bunch of examples here in a minute, is a profile at the top that positions you. Yes, that's a term for marketing, but positions you to a target audience. It tells the reader right away what you do and what you do well and what makes you special. In the past, we had objective statements, and sometimes you just put up their objective statement, or you would just say objective is to obtain blah 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 sort of a job. So for better or for worse, I don't make up the rules. I just follow them. But objective statements have been out of fashion now for some years. Second most important thing, of course, with the advent of computer searching, is those keywords. We talked about those keywords that you want to implant throughout your resume, and particularly at the top, in the top section in the profile. Whether it's a person or whether it's a computer, doesn't matter. You need to have the buzzwords that are going to appear on the jobs for which you're going. In today's resumes, now that I've told you that it's important to kind of squeeze things onto 1 or 2 pages, to be honest, one of the ways that you do that is by using very small margins. And it is in fashion these days to have little bitty, just a little bit of white space on the edges, just a little bit of white space at the top and the bottom. You don't want your typeface to be too small. That said, we do generally put a fair amount of content onto 1 page. I mentioned the LinkedIn URL a few minutes ago. And so what's out of fashion? Multiple fonts, sizes, graphics, colors, too much bold, underlining. Remember the resume we looked at just a minute ago was guilty of that. Blocks of text, we talked about that. And it's something called a functional resume is where you have lots of paragraphs of skill sets and skill categories, and then finally way down at the bottom somewhere you do have a very brief listing of your job titles and the company names. that's regarded as highly ineffective and will make the reader think that you're a career changer. And the reason they'll think that is because all these books for career changers tell people to write a functional resume to help point out how their skills are transferable. But the marketplace knows better, and people will be turned off by a functional resume. So, you know, I told you also we're all here who work in finance and financial services. What are the specific challenges that sometimes people need to overcome? And as I mentioned before, sometimes these extremely large financial institutions are complex, and the scale of business renders, you know, what you do to be a little hard to explain. The advice I would give you on this is focus on just telling the reader what they have to know for you to, you know, put your accomplishments out there. Try to tell them functionally what you do. Describe what sort of product or service, if you work in a financial institution, whatever sort of insurance product, whatever sort of investment style of hedge fund or you know, private equity fund or whatever. Just give a little bit of information. And people do tend to want to know what sort of customers you have. So for your finance people out there, most companies these days will want a finance person who's worked in a very similar sort of business, either in the very same industry or in an industry that has similar selling channels. You know, we sell through distributors, we sell through direct mail, we sell over the internet, we sell through retail stores. So, and they'll be interested in customer types. Who are the customers that you serve? Another problem with people in financial services is these generic job titles. Associate, managing director. That tells us your level, but it doesn't tell us functionally what you do. In the corporate world, we have a title: VP Finance, VP Accounting Systems, VP Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. These are all job titles that are fairly traditional and common in the corporate finance world. What I suggest, and as long as you're not trying to up your level, you're not trying to pretend to be a vice president when you're a director, or to deliberately mislead someone, as long as you're not misleading intentionally, it's completely appropriate to create a functional title for yourself. And you can put it in parentheses. There are some companies that, you know, have cute titles for things, and it's confusing out there in the marketplace. So put a more descriptive title, leave the associate, managing director, whatnot, and then put parentheses, you know, head of institutional equity sales for the Eastern region, something like that. And of course, an addendum is an answer. If you have too many deals really to fit on your resume, just make a separate sheet. Mache, any questions in the queue there?
Yes, I actually just wanted to jump in. So perfect. We have quite a few questions. So some of them, for example, from Michael. If your job is fairly routine in nature, example, preparing monthly financial statements, etc., how do you emphasize it as an accomplishment?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up right now as an example my finance executive. Now, this is a full-fledged CFO, so it may be a level or two above where Michael is in his career. For finance people in corporations, I very often find these lists to be very helpful, because these are going to match you to you know, things on the job description. A merger and acquisition deal obviously is an accomplishment, just having done it or being involved in it. Sometimes really the action for the accomplishments is something you improved, something you made better. Here this individual created an investment model and spearheaded comprehensive market analysis and strategic development for evaluating new revenue initiatives, leading to a 12% growth in a flat market. Now, he's not in sales, he's a finance guy, so he can't completely take credit for a 12% sales increase, but he can certainly take credit for contributing to it through these activities. So there you have a company accomplishment that relates to his direct effort. Enhanced, this is sort of general, but enhanced financial reporting by adding key metrics that drove executive decision making. Overhauled, Sometimes a choice of words. I love overhauled. Overhauled billing, receivables, and payables processes. Proactively managed the company through the 2009 economic downturn with $2 million in cost reductions and some other things that he did. Initiated, another good word, initiated the use of webcasts to communicate to all employees and shareholders. Successfully negotiated an exit from a European joint venture. So I hope that answers Michael's questions. I could go on all day. Machi, do we have another question here?
Yes.
Back to the webinar. Whoops. Okay.
Perfect. So Stregs asks if a 15-year consulting career in financial services, or with a 15-year career working on various client engagements, how to actually position it to be only 2 pages if there's various client engagements within financial services?
Well, you're not going to list them all. You're going to list the ones that relate to the types of things you want to do next. There are, surely this individual, over all the projects you've done, there are probably some that you either did early in your career and you've done bigger, similar, projects more recently, so you'd give the more recent ones and not the earlier ones. And you want to be selective. So for projects you didn't really enjoy, or if, let's say, now you're really finance-oriented, earlier in your career you were accounting-oriented, well, so don't spend your whole resume talking about accounting if you're really now a VP finance. So be selective in what you tell the audience.
Mm-hmm. Great, great.
I'm going to continue on, so if you can hold the questions so we don't get too far behind here.
Sure.
I've been talking a lot about this profile at the top. Let me show you an example here. And I realize I forgot to reset the top. Anyway, here are some different profile examples. And some of them are as short as 2 lines. Look at that. The longest one is about that length, maybe a 1/5 of a page at most. When I do have a block of text, notice that's just 3 lines. Every single one of these, so these are profile statements, obviously from different resumes that have been pulled out, but we immediately tell the reader what this person does. This is a Treasury executive in financial services, different from a Treasury executive in a corporation. And let's look here at our financial officer, who this particular person also was a chief administrative officer in a mid-sized firm. And that's why we have, at a mid-sized firm, sometimes a CFO will handle compensation, the legal, information technology, specialties in his repertoire, and then, of course, the more traditional M&A, tax, treasury, strategic planning. But embedded, whether it's done in a list or whether it's done embedded here, as you can see, we have the buzzwords implanted where we have capital markets, we have investment grade loans, we have leveraged finance, project finance, and we tell the reader fluent in French and conversational in Portuguese to boot. Okay, moving along. The absence of a profile is okay. If you decide not to have a profile and you go directly into your first job, like the example here of Mr. Last Name at a private equity firm in Atlanta, Georgia. He doesn't have a profile section here, and what happens then is the reader assumes that what you've been doing, that you've been an associate in the private equity job at a private equity firm, they just assume that's what you want to continue doing. So it doesn't take advantage of the opportunity to give some positioning and say what's special about you. But to be honest, this gets the job done in a very direct way and assuming you want to continue doing what you're already doing. Okay. I do advise, now we're sort of into the content, company names, and your job responsibilities. Some employers are very well known, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, IBM, Hewlett Packard, etc. But if your company is not well known then I do advise you to put a short little line description of what that company does, the markets they serve, the kind of products that they make. Job descriptions, very short. Again, 1, 2, or 3 lines, and then all those bullets really should be specific examples of work and projects that you've done, deals done, whatever. If you supervise people, this would be particularly relevant for our people who work in a finance job in the corporate position. Briefly describe the role, the scope of your job, the budget that you manage, and the staff number of people that you oversee. I like the word lead or led for past tense. I don't like the word direct. Directed sounds a little too autocratic. Hopefully you're a good leader and exhibit good leadership qualities, and so lead is and led is just a better word. Responsible for is just sort of wasted. There's just you don't really need to say responsible for. Just say led the blah 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 and blah blah. So you want to try to make all of your bullets accomplishments. I'm going to give an example. This is a Wall Street sales executive who works in the investment management field. And what was I going to point out? Here we go. This is the entire job description. Head of Sales and Trading for Equity Research for the Western Region. Clients included mutual funds, investment advisors, and hedge funds. Managed office of 5 research, sales, and trading professionals. Bam. That's the entire job description. Every bullet here is then an accomplishment. Played a key role. Sometimes we do things in teams, right? But just to indicate that you played a key role in transforming a newly acquired investment banking boutique into a $300 million flagship equity group. We have a lot of nice metrics in here, revenue growth. And let's move on so I don't get too stuck on here too quickly. Okay, Mache, a question from our queue there.
Yes, great. So we actually have a question, actually going back to a little bit previous few slides. What is a good font and the size of font that you would recommend for a resume? Okay.
I'm a very strong believer in what's called serif, S-E-R-I-F, a serif font. And I'll leave that to you to look up and educate yourself. But examples of serif fonts are Garamond, Palatino Linotype, Cambria, I believe, and Times New Roman. And the reason you want to use a serif font is that it's easier on the eyes, and it enables the reader it invites the reader's eyes into the document, particularly if they've just looked at 50 resumes just before they pulled yours up.
Great. Another question is, when drafting the deal sheet, how can we deal with privacy issues and not allude to portfolio or holding?
That's a good question. So, right, how do you, obviously, you have to protect the privacy of deals that were private instead of public. I'll show you real quick an investment banker resume here that will illustrate that. Okay. This section I highlighted in yellow. These are deals. Integral deal team member on 5 closed transactions, including. So we describe them generically. $84 million add-on acquisition / refinancing that doubled the size of existing portfolio company and added a European market presence. So we don't have any company names here. Successful exit of a $312 million, I say gadgets, type of parts company. So we describe them rather generically. You can also do a number that relates to a group of deals. I think we have run in here. Let's see, here we go. Managed the successful origination, structuring, and syndication of over $5 billion of senior, junior, and mezzanine credits. That's another way to do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Machi, why don't we move along, and we'll come back with questions in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
You've probably all heard about using great words, strong, nice words. We want to avoid helped, coordinated, assisted. These are just too junior, particularly for our population on the call today. Nice, excellent words. I love revamped, championed, overhauled. These are all great words for finance people. You overhauled a computer system, you revamped a process, you championed a new ERP system of some sort that enabled the company to grow. Developed and implemented, turned around, of course, is the best one. Accomplishments. As I told you, warned you a few minutes ago, I am a huge stickler for accomplishments. So let me see if I can help you know how you would transform a statement or a job responsibility into an accomplishment. A lot of accomplishments are just discrete projects that, sorry about that, a discrete project that has a beginning and end. It has a size, a scope, a budget. A consulting project is obviously a project. And the success factors for a project would be to come in on time, under budget, and perhaps that you overcame obstacles to accomplish that. Some accomplishments are referred to an improvement over time. Revenue increase from this period to that period, reduction in expenses, annual expenses, whatnot. So obviously, you know, as we all know, the objective in business is to either make more money or save money, or perhaps reduce risk related to not spending money on bad deals or whatever. Sometimes, you know, say you served on a committee. Well, if you were selected to serve on a committee, or if the CEO selected you, then that turns a mundane committee membership role into something a little more special. First ever is the really nice one. Whoops. Let's say you developed some processes, you developed a new format for doing deals, you created some modeling that helped your business managers manage their budgets better. You know, so for the first time ever, the capability for line managers to know what their budgets are in real time, something like that. In spite of. Grew revenues. Now again, back to the privacy question, sometimes people cannot divulge revenues, but you can say a percentage, and because you're not revealing numbers. So you can always say grew revenues from X percent, even if you can't say from what to what. And here's the best one, the best tip I can give you on converting things to accomplishments. Whenever I see to, you know, put in a new accounting system to improve accuracy and reduce time to close the books. Well, when you use that too, you're telling me why you did the project, that the purpose of the project was to improve closing time of the books and accuracy, but it doesn't tell me whether you actually accomplished that or not. So if you take that same statement and you make it past tense and you say that you did thus and such, that improved something, and particularly if you have a metric, that's even better, you know, that improved closing time by 20%. So that's probably the most important tip on how you convert a statement into a accomplishment. And I have a great resume. I don't know if we have any risk managers out there, but risk managers, this person have to be in a financial institution, are really quite difficult to have an accomplishment, right? Because your goal is to keep people and keep the company out of trouble. And so how do you make an accomplishment out of staying out of trouble, right? Well, here's how you do it. In this first bullet, he reduced the number of matters that required attention. That's an accounting or an auditing term that many of you would probably know. Reduced the number of matters requiring attention from 210 in 2003 to under 100 in 2005, with a pass on all exams. So obviously he turned around a poor performing or some big problems there in reducing the number of matters. Bringing transparency to the process and garnering praise from external constituents. That's how you enliven something. Words like entire. He was part of the committee that determines quarterly loan loss reserves for the entire organization. He managed a comprehensive due diligence reviews. Here we have negotiated an innovative brand covenants on a deal. Spearheaded, that's another good word. And this section I love. I left Enron in. I left Air Canada in as well. I took out the other company names to protect the innocent here. But the wow factor in this section comes from the names of the deals. Enron, I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's now a case study, I'm sure. But you know, when you're in, this man was into bankruptcies. These are big public, events, and to say that you've worked on the bankruptcy of a big corporate situation is nice. Okay, let's move along here. Macha, you want to take a question from the audience?
Sure. We definitely have a few. So we actually have a question from Hua. I have accounting working experience, but want to change from accounting to investment analysis. In my resume, how can I show my future employer that I am also qualified for the position, although I lack relevant working experience?
That's a challenge, and the biggest challenge is you really need a strategy that's going to get you in the door and cause somebody to want to hire you. Kind of what I said earlier, the resume can only do so much. So in that instance where you're changing careers, and unfortunately we don't have objective statements where you could say objective is to become an investment analyst or whatever, basically we do try to telegraph to the reader the direction you're going, and the way I do that is to say focus. Accounting professional focused on investment analysis. And then you would describe some skills. So hopefully there are maybe some modeling, some net present value calculations, internal rate of return calculations. Maybe you've done capital analysis for capital investments that would demonstrate the modeling and the financial analysis skills. So it's really your, the burden is yours to put whatever you do have in your experience out on the resume that's going to build the case. And if you venture too far, then you turn people off, and it's not going to work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how about one more, and then we'll move along.
Sure. A question from Shirley. Under accomplishments, do you prefer a specific number of money or percent increase? Are there any rules for what to use and when?
Yeah. No, a part of it's based on privacy and what you can use. As well as, in a startup, you may be increasing revenues from 1 million to 10 million. So those are tiny numbers, but it's a 1,000. I'm not doing the math very well, but yeah, you get the idea. It's a 1,000 or whatever percent increase in sales, which can also look sort of silly, So just sort of use your judgment as to what works best for you.
Great.
This is an example of sometimes we have great big accomplishments that really require a little more attention than just a one-liner. So this was actually from the institutional sales, equity sales professional resume I showed you a few minutes ago, where this is basically an overarching the lead-in statement here, oversaw increase in rankings of research providers from 50th to top 20. So that's a big change across a broad array of clients. If you're not in this business, this might not make sense to you, but if you're in the equity sales, institutional equity sales business, this would have meaning to your audience. And then we have the parts. Actively participated in recruiting over 21 research analysts, led the analyst brand franchise building activities, and here's another metric in this one, increased marketing outreach with over 50 conferences, field trips, and meetings annually, an increase of 40% over prior years. So this is a really nice format to keep in mind of a two-tiered bullets. Okay, a few don'ts, and this is where I get into the fun part for me, because having looked at millions of resumes and written perhaps hundreds, I have my own pet peeves. So here's where I get to talk about them. The first one is what I call storytelling. Recruited to turn around, blah, blah, blah. Like I said a few minutes ago, I don't know what you care about what you were supposed to do so much. What I care is what did you actually do. So tell me that you turned around this company. Don't tell me that you were recruited to turn around and that was your purpose. Do not repeat the same accomplishment in different places, even if you say it in different ways. We're looking to streamline, get the one good accomplishment out there, and let's not bury it with too much more content. Global is the hot thing these days. Everybody wants to be global and highlight their global experience. Using the word global will not convey that very well. Not that you shouldn't use the word global, but what really will convey your global experience is to give actual examples. Played a key role in opening the company's office in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Obtained legal advice, financing, and managed the real estate, whatever. Have worked and lived in, 5 different countries. So get very specific and granular and list the countries. And that makes your case for your global experience much better. And again, as I said earlier, don't give too much detail. And here's one of my pet peeves as well, is when people take their accomplishments out of the jobs in which they occur. And they make a special section at the top for these accomplishments. When you pull them out of the context of the jobs in which they occur, they lose 80% of their credibility. And it makes me wonder that maybe these are very old accomplishments and you've pulled them up and put them at the top because you don't have any recent accomplishments. So obviously that's a bad thing. Back to my pet peeves again. In the United States, we call them resumes. In the United States, something called a CV is something that's used in academia. And it can be one of these 20, 30, I've seen a 60-page resume because they put like 3 things on a page and it goes on forever. But these are people who are research scientists, PhDs, people who are professors. And for people, because our audience today, we're all business people, right? So in the world of business, in the United States, we call it a resume. For the 22% of you who are working outside the United States, it's called a CV, short for curriculum vitae, from the Latin. But sometimes in the United States, people, when they rise up to a more senior level, oh, I'm a CFO now, or I'm now an EVP or something, and suddenly they start referring to their resume as level. But it's technically wrong, and it's a resume, it's a resume, and it's a resume. I don't care if you're CEO. A biography has a completely different purpose, a very useful purpose. Biographies are really the best vehicle or document to have for a speaking engagement, let's say if you're going to serve on a not-for-profit or a professional association on a board or be on a committee or something. A biography is not used for job search, and let me just show you really quick of what I'm referring to when I say a bio. This happens to be one of my bios. I have them in various links. As you can see, it's just purely a narrative of my background and my credentials that are embedded here. And it works fine for speaking engagements. It does not work well for a job search, and vice versa. A resume does not serve a good purpose for a biography. Okay. Some very important advice, because some of you may be wondering, oh my goodness, I can't remember all the things I've done in my career. Well, you do have to keep some notes. I advise everybody keep probably both a physical folder and probably an electronic folder on your computer. Keep one of both, because you'll have electronic documents and then you'll have maybe physical printed reports or something that would go in a physical file, whatever works for you. But you have to keep these metrics around. When you start into a new job, if you're in a finance or accounting role, you have to say how many days does it take to close our books today, so that you can compare it after you've made some improvements 6 months or a year later. Because you will not remember it down the road. So it's really necessary. You really need to update that resume annually. and make sure that you have all the pieces of information at your fingertips that you'll need so that you can make the update. And just as a piece of general career advice, part of this whole process of keeping track of your accomplishments and your activities and projects you've worked on, this is the kind of stuff that you'll write up for your boss before your performance review. Your boss may or may not have asked for this. If the boss hasn't asked for you to write up your accomplishments prior to your review, you can ask the boss, would it be helpful if I wrote up my accomplishments and got them to you before my performance review? And that's a great way to manage your boss and manage your upward mobility as well. Ivy Exec offers basically two different levels of service, a sort of a quick resume improvement project, and then a full-blown in-depth resume with consultation time that goes with it. And of course we subscribe to all of these tenets that I've been preaching about today, and we'll help you and make sure that you get the accomplishments out there to make your resume impactful. So I'm one of 3 resume writers. As you can see, my other colleagues have tremendous credentials, and obviously we're all experienced in the business world.
Perfect.
And you can get more information about the resume writing services on the Ivy Exec website. The Elite Package is the more extensive program, and you can schedule a 15-minute appointment to inquire about that. Obviously, there's no cost for the early pre-appointment. And okay, I'm going to stay on this slide here for just a moment.
Perfect. So great. So as you can see, you can contact us with more questions at resumes@ivyexec.com. And also the link to sign up for the pre-appointment is ivyexec.com/resume. So definitely, I mean, as you can see, Laura has a lot of experience. So please ask all the questions. We'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. Also by email too. So definitely, we have a wealth of experience here. So thank you. Also, thank you, Laura, for sharing some of that wealth with us tonight.
You're welcome.
Definitely, it's I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else on the call as well. So we're going to actually dive into questions. We have plenty of questions, and
fire away.
Great. So. Okay, Keith asks, can you comment on the relative importance of keywords in the cover letter versus the resume? For example, if you use multiple cover letters.
The keyword matching is in the resumes. It's possible, but I've never actually heard of keyword searching being applied to a cover letter. Every recruiter I've ever known will look at the resume first, and only if they are interested in the resume will they look at the cover letter. Great.
And Shirley asked a follow-up question to that. What in your opinion is what is your opinion of composing a different resume for each specific job search? And she's heard arguments for both sides of the issue.
I'm sort of in between, and I'll show you in these resumes. What's really nice about, get one right here. This is probably the best example. It's very easy to change these words at the top: sales executive, investment management. Some people in financial services might, or in finance in a corporate situation, there might be 3 or 4 things that you want to highlight, or different things for different, and sometimes you go for more operationally oriented jobs, other times it maybe more pure finance. So it's very easy to adjust these words and adjust keywords in this section to redirect yourself towards different kinds of jobs. Usually it's just not necessary. If the bullets are done well, you usually don't have to change them at all. So every once in a while people really just do need 2 completely different resumes, and they're going to have different content presented. But for most people, tweaking the top here a little bit will accomplish the mission of getting yourself directed. It is very helpful to, again, to pull the words from the job you're going for and embed them here in this profile section.
Perfect, perfect. So Swati had a question. How do you explain a gap of more than a year in your work experience?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. There are different options. You can just ignore it. You know, just put your jobs out there and leave it blank and let people ask you about it. If you do plug it in with sort of, quote, consulting work, you really need to have some consulting work that you've done. Doesn't matter if you did it for free. That's okay. It's okay if your entry says volunteer. You know, if you were actually volunteering, you know, it'd be nice to have some accomplishments there. You need to give some specifics. You know, led a capital fundraising drive for the XYZ elementary school, garnering 20% increase over the prior year in funds raised, or something like that. Generally speaking, on a resume, it's you don't sort of give an example. Took a sabbatical and traveled through Europe, or took care of an ailing parent. You know, there are lots of good reasons why you might be out of the market. Or if you worked in a field like collateralized debt obligations, or CLOs, CDOs, mortgage-backed securities. You know, a lot of folks in those fields just went unemployed, you know, for a year or so after 2008. Hopefully you've all relanded again. So I'm sorry I can't give you a more definitive answer. It just sort of depends on your situation, and sometimes you try different things and see how well it goes, you know, with your audience.
Perfect, perfect. Can you, actually, Luciano had a question. What advice, or on the resume or just in general, would you give somebody who wishes to break into finance, especially if they're, you know, out of grad school, or they're recently graduated?
It's tough. I assume this person's might be coming from marketing or some rather different discipline. Can't really tell from the question. Again, really the best you can do is put content in your resume that is true of work that you have done that relates, hopefully, or relates in some way to the finance jobs you're going for. And then what you have to realize is the resume just isn't going to, you know, get the job done for you. You have to come up with a job search strategy and a willingness to be honest. I tell everybody these days, if you are really serious about making a segue into some other field, you almost have to do some work for free. You know, find a friend or a relative who runs a small business and you know, give them a free something or the other to give you some of those skills to put on your resume, or do it in a volunteer setting for not-for-profit where you function as treasurer, or, you know, something financial that would build a case. But it doesn't matter if you do things for free or volunteer for them. You have to get actual experience these days. Very few companies will hire somebody to make a big leap without some direct experience. We're a little short on time, but I can stay for a couple of minutes.
Perfect. Maybe last question from Devendra. She actually followed up asking, so we discussed about the font that you prefer. What about the size that you should use in the resume?
You know, it actually depends on the font as to what size works best. Generally between 10 and 11. You can actually do a 10.5 point. You just manually type it in there in the little box at the top of the word processor screen. Somewhere between 10 and 11. Actually, one of the mistakes people make is having tiny little print, and it makes your background look tiny. You know, you want it readable enough that, you know, the accomplishments really jump out.
So thank you so much, Laura, for doing a great webinar. We definitely appreciate
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Perfect, perfect, and thank you everybody as well for joining us tonight. We hope to see you on the next webinar.
Thanks much, Thank you, everyone.